Good morning, everybody. Wednesday's podcast focused on Europe's optimism, which could be dented by problems in raising funds for defense and the probability that there would be no imminent ceasefire deal with Russia. President Putin's statement last night confirms our views. No ceasefire deal is on the horizon. Today's podcast focuses on China, which in PPP terms is the world's largest economy. China, however, faces many domestic issues, ranging from the need to regain consumer confidence after the government's deliberate bursting of the property bubble, and the need to refinance local governments, many of which are in dire trouble. China's foreign problems center around unvoiced but clear policies to isolate China, if not to disrupt the country's growth plans. Tensions, in fact, with China are rising once again, and America is focusing more resources into the Pacific. Containment policies include disrupting China's supplies of key materials needed for its growing manufacturing sector, which has consistently accounted for around 30% of GDP since the 1990s, compared with America's now less than 10%. There are three key factors going for China. First, most of the country's debt is internal. Second, the country has one of the most internally competitive economies in the world, with world-class design and engineers supported by a highly developed and efficient supply chain. And third, China's 534 million households save 30% of their gross income. This amounted to the princely sum of $4.2 trillion last year, forecast to rise to $5.7 trillion by 2030. In other words, China's household savings of 5.7 trillion are alone greater than all countries' GDP, excepting the USA and China itself. It is China's manufacturing sector and the country's household savings that will become the foundation for the country's future growth. By households just saving 35% instead of 37% of their savings would add 4% to consumers' spending in China. Measures are being taken by Beijing to encourage this move. Some 10 years ago, China began focusing on developing automation and robotics in their factories, as this writer experienced in his factory visits across the country since 1993. This is not just a question of ifs. China knows what comes next if they are first to unlock these robots. They will iterate faster than the USA. They will subsidize the industry to an unprecedented extent. They will achieve massive economies of scale and oversupply all markets. And the general purpose of robotics boom will be nothing but a bad dream for the USA if nothing changes. So wrote SemiAnalysis, an American independent consultancy in the fields of semiconductors and A1. They give two examples. First, China has fully implemented their lights out factories. For example, Xiaomi's lights out factory constantly with 0 humans employed and produces 1 smartphone every minute. This example is not an isolated instance. Second, building an exactly identical robotic are 2.2 times more expensive than in China. Under the hood, the situation is even more alarming. Even if those components are labeled made in China, they rely heavily upon China's made parts and materials with no viable scalable alternative. These examples demonstrate the huge difference in manufacturing proficiency with America and other G7 countries. China's growing industrial proficiency has nothing to do with cheap labor, but with a country with a robust industrial base that has now created one single machine that can produce goods entirely autonomously. What next? These are the real reasons why Washington will use all of its tools and resources to deny China achieving its robotic revolution. So to conclude, our next podcast will be on Monday. Do have a good weekend.